Today the paper I am going to present is titled Unsupervised Learning of Object Landmarks through Conditional Image Generation. First I will walk you through the outline of the presentation. First I am going to discuss the problem, then the solution architecture to that problem, as well as the proposed solution and the experimental setup. Last but not the least, the experiments they have conducted for this problem. So what's the problem they are trying to solve? The problem they are trying to solve is to get landmark detectors for visual objects. So what does it mean when we say the term landmark? Landmarks are basically like the visually salient points in an object. Like if we look into this picture of 4 faces, so basically the landmarks are like the eyes, nose and the lips of a human face, and like the landmark points change picture to picture. So how can we solve this problem? That means how can we get these landmarks? So the obvious solution will be to train a neural network with the help of ground truth annotations in a supervised manner. But in this paper they are not trying to solve this problem in a supervised manner, rather they are trying to solve this in an unsupervised manner. So let's look into their solution. So the most interesting thing about this solution is that primarily they are not trying to solve the problem of finding the landmarks. Rather they are trying to find the landmarks as a byproduct of generating images. So what does it mean? Basically they are taking 2 images, X the source image and X prime the target image. Basically they can be taken from a video sequence, or maybe the source image can be passed through some transformation and the target image can be obtained through this way. And then they are trying to reconstruct the target image, and in the process of that they will obtain the landmarks. So first the target image is passed through a deep network to get some heat maps. Here they are obtaining k heat maps, 1 for each landmark, and after that we can make an assumption that in these heat maps we'll get some pixels which has like which will have like dominant response. That means if we look into this pixel here, it has like the maximum value in the whole heat map. So we can say that like these pixels can be some potential landmark points. So the task here would be to find the coordinate of this pixel. So how can we do that? The obvious thing would be to take the maxima of this heat map, and from that maxima we can obtain the coordinate. But they are not solving this problem in that manner. Rather they are trying to they are trying to get a centroid of the heat map, basically a weighted centroid, and from these centroids we'll get like k, x and y pairs from each heat map, and from those x and y coordinates we are going to generate a Gaussian heat map where the Gaussian function will be centered on x and y with some small sigma value. Next, what they are going to do is like extract some features from the source image. So they are extracting some features with a deep neural network, and after that they are going to stack the Gaussian heat maps with the features extracted from the source image. Finally, another deep neural network has been used to reconstruct the target image. So how are we gonna train this network? Basically basically here what they are doing is they are reconstructing the target image, that means x prime to x prime hat. So the loss would be a reconstruction loss between x prime hat and x prime. So let's go deeper into their solution. So what's the first thing we need for this solution? We need a function to extract features from the target image x prime. So we can call that function phi. Basically here phi is a neural network. So phi takes the input x prime and it generates the output y prime, that means the Gaussian heat maps. And we need another function psi to reconstruct the target image. So here psi will take input x and y prime, that means these Gaussian heat maps, and it will output the reconstructed target image. So basically the reconstructed target image x prime hat will be psi of x and phi x prime. And what will be the loss? Loss will be some reconstruction loss between x prime and x prime hat. So now what is their main contribution in this solution? Basically they have concocted a heat map bottleneck where they are distilling the information from this generated k heat maps to get the k Gaussian heat maps. So how they are doing that? Let's look into the equation. So they are doing a heat map renormalization. Basically we have the values SU xk, which are like the pixel values in this heat map. Then they are taking the exponential of those values, and then after that they are weighting the pixel values, that means u's are basically the pixel coordinate values, and then summing it and getting the coordinate of the centroid. And if we look into the separable implementation which they finally implemented in their code, we can see that they are taking another value SUI. SUI means, if we look into this Gaussian heat map, we can say that for this column all the values of x are constant, and same for this column and same for this column. Now if we sum these values column wise and do this thing, we'll obtain a 1D value, something like this. And if we do this for the rows as well, we will get some values like this. And the position of the maximal point in these 1D values as well as this will give us the x and y values. After that, we are going to use a Gaussian like function centered in those x and y values. Here uk prime is basically x1 and y1, x and y1, and we will generate the Gaussian heat maps. So why do we need the Gaussian heat maps? Basically we need the Gaussian heat maps because the information in that representation is more useful for a neural network. Now let's talk about the reconstruction loss. They could have used like adversarial loss or some sort of other loss like the L2 loss, but they are using perceptual loss. Perceptual loss for reconstruction. So what does this perceptual loss means? So at first let's look into the equation. Here we are saying that the equation is basically gamma L x prime minus gamma L x prime hat. Before explaining what does gamma L means, let's look into the diagram. Basically they are passing the original target image, that means x prime and x prime hat, to a pretend VGG network, where this VGG from which we will get the VGG features of x prime and x prime hat, and we will calculate the loss between each loss at each layer and sum those up. We'll also add the loss at image space, that means just L2 norm between x prime and x prime hat. So basically this is the perceptual loss, and they are achieving pretty good result using this simple loss. So let's talk about their experimental setup. So if we look into this solution architecture, we can see that they are using two encoder networks, one here that is basically phi, and one to extract features from the source image. So what's the architecture of this encoder network? So they are not using state-of-the-art encoder networks like inception network or something like that. They are using simple convolutional neural network consisting of convolutional blocks, and each block has basically two layers. And if we look into this figure, the convolutional layers are mostly consist of 3x3 kernel, and apart from the first one which is like 7x7 kernel, and at each block we are basically downsampling spatially by 2 and also increasing, also doubling the number of channel at each layer. Finally, we'll get the heat maps whose spatial dimension will be 16 by 16. And the difference between this encoder and this encoder is that here we have to obtain k heat maps for k landmarks. Here we don't need that. So to obtain the k heat maps, we will use another 1 by 1 convolutional block, and we will map those 16 by 16 channels to 16 by 16 by 16 into k heat maps. So that's the architecture of the encoder network. Now let's talk about the regressor network. So what's the regressor network? Regressor network is the network which they are using to finally reconstruct the target image. And its architecture is basically the opposite of the encoder network. Basically, they are getting the stacked feature. Basically, that's it. These are the stacked features. That means the features extracted from the source image and the Gaussian heat maps stacked together, and then passing it to a regressor network. And here at each block, it's specially upsampling by 2, and also the number of channels has been decreased by 2. And they have made a unique choice for this upsampling. Instead of doing like regular unpolling or deconvolution, they are using bilinear interpolation. So that's it for the regressor network architecture. Now let's look into the experiments. First, I will start with a toy example. So we have the solution architecture here, and we are passing two sources of input. One is source image X, and another is the target image X prime. So here we can see like there are like 3 source images, and there are like corresponding 3 target images, and it's pretty evident that the target images are like a deformed version of the source image. And after passing each image pair through this network, we'll obtain the landmarks in the target image. Here are the landmarks, like here are the 10 landmarks, and as well as finally here these target images will be reconstructed again. And we can see here the network was pretty capable of reconstructing the target images. And here we have some more examples from Vox LF dataset. And now we'll look into a particular example. Here we can see a face of an woman, and after passing through this network, we'll obtain like multiple landmarks. Here instead of here we are just considering 8 landmarks. Now, what does the heat maps look physically? If we look into the heat maps and map the landmarks back into the heat maps, we can see that the landmarks have been selected from the heat maps where there was like the maximal response. So so it does make sense. And here is another example of the landmarks and the heat maps. Now let's look into some benchmark results. So first, they have applied their method to learn facial landmarks, and these are the like unsupervised landmarks they have obtained in MFLA dataset, and these are like the unsupervised 10 landmark points in each face. So what they have done next, like these landmarks are a bit arbitrary, so they have to compare their methods with other supervised previously developed methods and unsupervised methods. So what they have done that these images has like ground truth annotations, and the ground truth annotations are like these white circles. So they have trained another linear regression network which will map these 10 landmark points to these 5 landmark points. After this, they are calculating the interocular distance between the black circles in between the white circles, and getting a error measure. So these are the quantitative results, and these are like all the supervised method, and the matrix is like that, as it is like a distance matrix, so the value is like the lower is better. We can see that the best result here is like 5.39, and in AFLW it's like 6.9. And here are some unsupervised or self-supervised method, and they are using like the key points like us as well, like 30 or 50 or 10 or 30 key points. And the state of the art here is like 3.16, and for AFLW it's like 6.58, and these guys have achieved like 2.54 with 50 key points and 6.31 in AFLW dataset. So they have significantly surpassed the state of the art result. Now they have conducted some ablation study as well. As I have discussed earlier, like one of their major contribution was incorporating the heat mass bottleneck. So what will happen if we don't include this heat map bottleneck? So one thing we can do is like replace it with a fully connected layer, so that this encoder network will act like a autoencoder, like conventional autoencoder. And they have exactly done that experiment, and like the experiment was like that. This part was replaced with a with a FC layer, and they have varied the number of neurons, and the results are pretty bad. Like it's like 10 times worse than the results they have achieved. And their another contribution to this work was that instead of using like conventional adversarial loss or L2 loss, they have used perceptual loss. So what would have happened if they didn't use perceptual loss, instead they used adversarial loss? So here are the results. Like they have experimented L1 loss, L2 loss, as well as the adversarial loss, and all of these perform worse than the perceptual loss. So these were the ablations. Now their solution is more of a general form. That means that solution was not developed for just finding the landmarks in human traces. So why not use it for learning human pose as well? And they have exactly done that. So these are the results from BBC pose datasets. And here the hollow circles are like the ground truths, and the solid ones are the unsupervised landmarks they have detected. And the bottom row, and they have got the results in the bottom row where the hollow circles and the solid circles are more closer, because they have again used a supervised linear regressor to achieve these points. And these are the quantitative results. Here they have got like here the matrix is like that, higher is better. Here they have got results for different body parts like head, wrists, elbows and shoulders, and their average best result is like 68.44, but here the state of the art is like 88.01 or around 80. And the thing is that all these 5 methods are supervised method, and only theirs one is like the unsupervised method here. So they have an edge here because their method is not supervised. And they have conducted some pose experiment on human 3.6 million dataset as well. So basically they are passing a source image like we have discussed previously, and a target image where the pose is significantly different, and the network was able to reconstruct the image and as well as detect some visually significant landmarks. And here are some more examples, like the network was able to detect landmarks in different poses as well, and different orientation as well. So they have conducted another interesting experiments, like till now we have talked about human faces and human poses. So what will happen if we implement the same solution for 3D objects? So what the network will predict in those 3D objects? What they have found that their solution detects semantically significant points. That means here in this car, the landmarks are like the front of the car, the windshield, even the tail of the car, and they have shown that their method is invariant to change in azimuth angle as well as the elevation angle. Azimuth angle means the horizontal angle, and elevation is the vertical angle. And they have also shown that Their method is invariant to lightning, that means illumination changes, as well as it works for various kind of objects as well. Like here they were able to detect landmarks point for planes, and here for like model animals and buses as well. Lastly, they have conducted another experiment where they tried to factorize appearance and geometry. So what does appearance and geometry means? Like geometry is pretty straightforward. From the target image, they are trying to get the landmarks. That means they are trying to get the salient points where the human is making poses. So the geometry means the term geometry means the salient poses which are required to construct the pose of an image. And by appearance it means that the color and texture of an image as well as the background. So here these are like the images taken from Google Street View, the images, and they are basically from the house numbers. So, and here the style. So here style means like the blue background, here the red background, and the geometry means the shape of 5 or shape of O. And during the training time, the network the network didn't see 5 and 3 together like this pair, but still the network was able to reconstruct the geometry of 5 with the background of 3. So through this experiment, they have proved that their network was able to factorize appearance and geometry. That means the network is learning geometry from this part and copying appearance or style from the source image. And they have shown more results in human faces as well. If we look into this image, these two images are drastically different in appearance, but in the reconstructed image, this woman face was able to mimic the tilt of this face as well as retain the facial features of the women. So that was it.